for today is solid friction. I said solid friction because we have friction in other states of matter. The one in solid, we call it solid friction, but the one in liquid and gas, we call it viscosity. Now, for the sake of today's topic, we are going to deal with that of solid friction. Then we are going to have types of friction. We are going to have laws of solid friction. We are going to have advantages of friction, then disadvantages of friction, the method of reducing friction. Now, solid friction. Solid friction is the force between two solid surfaces in contact, which opposes the motion of one surface over another one. Take note, two solid surfaces. Then it opposes what? The motion of one over another one. Take for instance, if you have an object like this, and if you want to pull or push this object over this solid surface, and there will be certain friction that will delay it from motion or from moving. Therefore, we have two types of solid friction. The one that will make an object not to move at initial stage, and we call it limiting or static friction. Limiting or static friction is the maximum force that must be overcome before an object or a surface will move over another surface. Then the second one, we call it what? Kinetic or dynamic friction. That's why you see, when you pull an object, you cannot just leave it. So you still need to constantly apply force before that object will continue moving. Therefore, the force or the frictional force that opposes object in motion is called dynamic or kinetic friction. So those are the two types of solid friction we have. Then we have laws of solid friction. What are the laws? The first one says frictional force vary directly with normal reaction. So let's put it in practice. So look at it. So when you have a body like this, so frictional force vary directly with normal reaction. Don't forget, look at this diagram. The normal reaction is same thing as the weight of the body. So which means the higher the weight of the body, the higher the frictional force. Let's see it in practice. So you have this object. When you have this object, this is 50 grams. Let's put 50 grams and see the frictional force here. See, it's giving us something like 20.1. 20.1. Let's increase the mass and see what will happen. Making 100 grams. See, it's giving us 30.2. 30.2. Then let's increase it. So this is 40 at 40.2. So which means frictional force vary directly with normal reaction. The higher the body or the object you place on another surface, the higher the force you will require to push it over the second surface. Then the second, in that case, we can use to derive the formula. So the frictional force F vary directly with normal reaction, which is same thing as what? The weight of the body. Normal reaction what? R. And you know when you remove this one, you are going to replace it with what? Equal to and constant. Therefore, we have F is equal to KR. Then K under this topic, under friction, is called mu, which is what? Coefficient of frictional force. Therefore, F is equal to mu R. Where this one represents coefficients of frictional force. We can make it the subject of formula. Therefore, coefficients of frictional force is equal to force applied over normal reaction. Now, don't forget, this normal reaction is same thing as weight. Therefore, we can write this one as F over mg. And what is the unit of force? Is Newton. Then unit of weight is also what? Newton. So which means the coefficient of frictional force does not have a unit. It does not have unit. But this one, we just cancel this one. Now, let's go to the next law. It says it depends on nature of surface in contact. That is, the frictional force depends on whether the surface is smooth or rough. So this, we have two different surfaces here. This one is smooth surface. This is what? Rough surface. Now let's try it with 50 gram on smooth surface and see what will happen. For smooth surface, we are having 20.1. Then let's go to rough surface and see. For the rough surface, so it's giving us what? 50.2, which means the frictional force depends on whether the surface is smooth or rough. Now let's go to the next one. The next one is it does not depend on area of surface in contact. That is, it does not depend whether the surface is wide or narrow, or whether it's what, small or big. Let's try that again on this object. This object has two different surfaces. This is one, which is very small compared with this. Let's see whether we are going to get the same thing. Since the law says it does not depend on what? The nature, the area, but it depends on the nature. Say this one, so it's giving us 10.2. Let's change the area to the smaller one. So it's giving us the same thing, 10.2. So which means frictional force does not depend on whether the surface is wide or small or big, but it depends on what? Nature, whether the surface is smooth or rough. Then the next one is what? It opposes what? Relative motion. Don't forget, when I was defining frictional force, I said it opposes what? Relative motion. The function of the force, frictional force, is to oppose what? Motion of one surface over another one. Then the next one, it increases with what? The force which tends to start the motion. That is, the higher the frictional force, the higher the limiting frictional force or the load you put on the surface. Now let's go to the next one, which is advantages of friction. When we say advantages of friction, it means friction has its own advantage that we gain from friction. So we need friction. That, for instance, when you are walking, if there's no friction between the heel of our shoe and the floor, it will be sliding down. There are another application of friction that will serve as an advantage for us is when you want to use nail to hold the two wood together. If there's no friction, as you are eating the nail, it will remove back. There are another one when you are using screw. Another one is when you are grinding pepper with your grinder. So it's as a result of friction between the grinder that will make the grinder to grind the pepper. The another one is when you are using stone to sharp your knife or tissue. So it's as a result of friction between the two surfaces. But this so-called friction, that we say it has what? Advantage. It has disadvantage as well. So what are the disadvantages of friction? For instance, if you look at the heel of the shoe after using it for some time, you see that it wear out. So therefore, friction causes wear and tear. Friction causes wear and tear. Another one is it. So it generates it. Look at our grinder. When you are using it after some time, you see that the grinder here, it will look smooth. It will not grind again because the surface will tear off. So the same thing applicable to our cloth, especially on the cloth at the part of our armpit. If you are washing it like this, after some time, discover that the part will fade because the friction there causes what? Wear and tear. Then another one is this. It generates it. If you rub your palm together like this, you see that after some time you feel it. So friction generates what? It. And don't forget, that heat is part of energy that we are supplying. Therefore, it will reduce efficiency of machine. Then how are we going to say it's good in one aspect and it's not good in the other aspect? Therefore, we need to look for means of reducing it in the aspect that we don't need it. So those are the words. That's why we have method of reducing friction. we have three major methods of reducing friction. The first one is by applying what? Lubricant. So most of the time when you want to lose something, bolt or not, for instance, and you find it difficult to go and drop oil on it, after some time you lose it easily. So one of the methods of reducing friction is what? Application of what? Lubricant. Then another one, look at most of our moving part of machine. You see something there, you see something like bearing, small ball, metallic ball like this. So that is what? Another method of reducing friction, that is application of what? Ball bearing. While the last one is shape. So most of our car or ship or plane, if you look at their shape, their shape look what? Pointed in the front part. It looks something like, if you look at it, if you see something like this, let's say we have this, a car like this, you see the front part like this. So if you look at it like this is front part. So they have already reduced the contact and the surface contact with air friction by what? Making the front part pointed. The same thing applicable to the plane. If you look at the plane, the front part is what? Pointed, in order to reduce friction. Therefore, the third method of reducing friction is what? They call it streamlining. And make the front part of the object or body pointed. So the next topic will be on liquid and gas friction, which is what? Viscosity.